So if a person's been in one profession or one role, or maybe even an industry for their whole career, they often define a large part of who they are based on that. And so who are they without that? For some people, that can be a really terrifying question. And then the meaning and purpose that they derive from their role. How do you go into a cocktail hour or happy hour and introduce yourself anymore when you don't have that sense of that role or that title?
Welcome back to the Real Retirement Show. My name is Yasmin, here with my co-host Kathleen. Whether you're retired or thinking about retirement, we delve into the multifaceted world of retirement beyond the finances. This isn't your typical retirement conversation. It's a vibrant journey into what retirement truly means in today's world. We bring you real stories from real retirees and experts discussing real challenges, surprises, joys, heartaches, and the myriad of emotions that come with retirement. From addressing family dynamics to mental and physical health to finding purpose, we tackle the issues that truly matter to retirees and those thinking about retirement. In this episode, we're thrilled to have Lori and Kirsten Meneghello with us. They are two experts in navigating the retirement transition and retirement coaches who help clients explore the complex emotions and challenges that come with the significant life change. This conversation goes beyond the typical retirement topics, touching on identity, purpose, and how to find fulfillment without the defining label of a job title. Whether you're already enjoying retirement or just starting to consider what it might look like for you, this episode is packed with valuable insights and practical advice. Join us as we discuss how to redefine ourselves, build meaningful relationships, and approach the next chapter of our lives with excitement and intention. Let's join our conversation. Lori and Kirsten, if you would share with us a little bit about your personal journey as well as your career journey that's led you into helping others transition into this particular stage of their lives.
Kirsten, would you like to go first?
Oh, sure. Why not? So I've been coaching corporate leaders since 2010. I started my own coaching practice. And I focus mostly on how to help leaders become more effective communicators. So creating alignment, buy-in, creating a vision, but then also just like effectively delegating how to navigate conflict, give others feedback, things like that too. And so I've really enjoyed that. And I would say about 4 years ago, I started asking myself, what does retirement look like for me?
Mhm.
And I am not proud to say that I'm a workaholic. I identify strongly with my profession and the career and the business that I built. And so for me, it's like, well, what would it look like if work was not the primary focus of my life? And I really came up blank. And so I started searching for answers online. Through that process, realized that there were folks out there and there were processes and there were tools that a person could use to help them navigate this transition. And through that, found the Retirement Coaches Association, became certified as a professional retirement transition coach. And now Lori and I get the joy and the privilege to help professionals make this transition. And I'm still working on answering these questions for myself as well.
Oh, thank you, Kirsten.
I'm Lori, and I started my career really focused in process improvement work. I worked for the Boeing company in Seattle. And through that initial work, I was working with manufacturing employees and leaders to try to figure out how can employees own their own improvement to the work that they're doing, which required a shift in the manager mindset. So we started training managers about what does it mean to really empower, to enable others to generate their own solutions to their work. And so I found that I was much more aligned with more of the anthropological, sociological side of organizations than I was with the scientific data that I was working with for a period of time. So I pivoted my career pretty early from a more technical aspect to more sociological, anthropological, working with leaders and teams in different Fortune 500 companies. I had the privilege of doing that over a number of years. And I had worked as an HR business partner, really in a strategic role as well in some large companies. And I got to the end of a massive reorganization, and a company I was working in at the time was Nike. And it was 2017. And I decided that I needed to really just take a break. I needed to take a pause. And I left that kind of corporate world in a state of kind of feeling I was in this liminal space of unknown. And I was definitely in a state of transition, life transition. Some significant events had all happened within a number of months. And it really became what we consider this language around being a life quake. You've got several different events that happen, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, where am I? What am I doing? Who am I? What do I want to be? What is my purpose? So, really starting to reflect on those questions. And I came easily into doing some leadership coaching work because that had been part of my work for several years in large companies. And it just fell in my lap. And I was like, is this what I really want to be doing? And yes, it is helping leaders really become the best they can be so they can get the most out of their employee population. So, worked in the leadership coaching and development space, started my own practice like Kirsten did. And I then came across a friend of mine who was really thinking about retiring, selling his financial practice. And as part of that conversation, and as part of his kind of the merger with another company, they assigned him a retirement coach. And I said, tell me more. What does that mean? What is that like? What is that? What are the questions they're asking you? So that gave me a really big nudge to explore what is retirement coaching. And it's really about helping people who are at this stage in their life where they've had a lot of significant intentional time focused on their career, their identity is there. And so what's next? And so through this retirement coaching program, I came across and really fell in love with the idea of helping people at this stage in their life. So I focus on kind of the last couple of years of somebody's career. What is the legacy they really want to leave? What is that leadership legacy you want to leave? And then how can I partner with you to transition into really designing what's next? So that's where I'm at in my career right now.
That's an amazing story for both of you. And I don't know if Yasmin has shared this with you, but I actually retired about a year and a half ago. And I did that for 3 months. And then Yasmin and I started this. And so I often think, gosh, where were you when I needed you most? There was no one on the horizon that could answer my questions. And I thought I prepared for retirement. I truly did. I had lots of plans. I knew what I wanted to do. But then when I started experiencing that first few months of it, everything went haywire. And I wish I had known someone that might have been able to help me through that transition period. And so thankfully, Yasmin was the guy.
As we've looked into this, there's lots of people like Lori, both you and Kirsten, and so many more who are helping plan as well as navigate this journey. And I'm curious from your perspective, from the conversations you've had with clients and others, what are some of the common challenges that you've noticed professionals are experiencing as they are transitioning into this chapter of retirement?
I think there are so many that come to mind. So I'll start and then Lori, please jump in. This definitely identity. So if a person's been in one profession or one role, or maybe even an industry for their whole career, it's like they often define a large part of who they are based on that. And so who are they without that? For some people, that can be a really terrifying question. And then the meaning and purpose that they derive from their role. How do you go into a cocktail hour or happy hour and introduce yourself anymore when you don't have that sense of that role or that title? And then another big one is social connection, because a lot of us have a lot of work friends or friends with clients, things like that too. So we get our social needs met. That is the biggest, I see as a huge gap as well when people aren't working.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple, Kirsten. Thank you. I think that another challenge really is if you are a part of a couple, a partnership with somebody, and you're trying to figure out, am I ready? Is my partner ready? Are we aligned on what retirement looks like? And oftentimes that's no, that conversation hasn't happened. They've done the financial planning part of it. Financially, they're set to say, yes, we can actually live off of the income that we're going to have beyond earning a regular salary. And so they've had that conversation, but they haven't sat down and said, what does this look like for the two of us going forward? Are we aligned? If we're not aligned, whether it's timing, whether it's what does it look like with regards to the location we want to live in, what sort of activities do we want to be doing? How do I want to be in this world doing things with myself and my friends? So that's a really important challenge that I think gets overlooked oftentimes. It's like, hey, I'm ready to retire. Let's go. One other challenge that Kirsten touched on is that social connection, the relationships. So you have easy access to people at work. So where is that going to happen for you if you have invested 40, 50 hours a week in being able to be in a work environment? All of a sudden it's like, wait, I haven't really created my social connection or created how I'm going to be volunteering. What is my contribution to the world beyond just the work? And so figuring out where do I have those social connections and what might my volunteer opportunity be that will also create some social connections. I think those are some of the additional challenges. There's several, but I would say those are some of the largest ones that we tend to come across.
No, those were certainly mine. There's no question. You're absolutely on point. And I think that having a conversation, and Yasmin and I have talked about this, the conversation I've had with the new friends that I've met, and I sold my business, moved to a new city, and there was a lot of things happening. And I found that they were sharing the same challenges and they had the same questions about how do I, and that point that you made about a social introduction, that's such a stumbling block for some people that, they don't know how to move through that and they can't thrive in the beginning period of their retirement. So I'm really interested about thriving. That's a topic that I'm
Okay.
clearly want to explore today if we have time.
Yeah.
Well, and with that introduction, I've personally felt this as well too, is like, if I'm not this particular work title or something, who am I? And also a lot of folks have derived some sense of pride or significance from having this particular title or role or whatever it is. And I'm curious, what has been your observation about this transition from having a certain role or title or identity more specifically to who am I now?
I think one of the ways to do that is to figure out what brings you joy today that you want to carry into your life going forward. What are the things that you would like to actually just leave as they are and to really explore what are some ways that I want to be and experience my life going forward, which takes some reflection time. It takes conversation. One of the things we ask people to do is to think about who have been role models in your life who have retired well. One of our participants in a recent program actually has been having conversations with people in her social life, her family life about, tell me a little bit about what retirement means to you. And that's another thing that we have discovered is that retirement means something very different in our world today. We hear a lot of this unretirement. Which Kathleen, it sounds like maybe that would fit with where you are, is there was something exciting and thrilling and you thought about, I'm going to thrive after my time in my career. And then something happened shortly after. You're like, wait a second, I'm not so sure I'm ready for not having work be a part of how I show up and contribute to the world. So I think it took some reflection. It took some time to say, wait, I'm away from the work environment. What am I missing? What have I failed to actually build in that used to bring me joy so that I can continue to thrive? One of the other things we do is we ask people to think about, what are they curious about? It's different than a bucket list. What am I curious about in the world today? What might be activities, experiences that I just have some sort of a light bulb goes on, and so we have them create a curious list. And one of the things that we ask them to do is to choose a couple things from your curious list to just explore. What might it look like to explore some of those things? So for myself, when I created my initial curious list, so I was a tap dancer as a child. And one of the other things I always wanted to do was to learn how to swim. I've never been able to, I can swim. I can't swim laps. I wanted to add that into I thought I wanted to add it in as part of my day-to-day kind of fitness routine. So guess what? A couple months later, I signed up for tap dancing class again. I've been taking tap class on and off through the rec center. And then I've been taking swimming lessons. So it's what do you add in that you're like, okay, I'm just going to try it. And I've continued to do both of those things. There's a whole list that I have that at any point in time, I'm like, what could I begin to do today off of my curious list that I'm going to just go explore and test out? So I think those are things that help people thrive is really reflecting, taking time, asking those questions. Who am I today? What do I want? What's important to me today? What am I grateful for? And how do you build those into your kind of what's next beyond your significant career? Kirsten, what would you like to add?
I used to think about retirement being like this fixed period in time, like in the future. And what I've discovered through using the curious list and reflecting on this myself is like, there are things that I'm interested in that I am accelerating into my life now. So I'm age 54. Instead of waiting until I retire, whenever that is, whatever that looks like, I'm doing them now. And maybe not all of them, but things that I'm excited about and curious about because tomorrow's not promised to us. I've had some friends and acquaintances go through they've died early. I had a client pass away unexpectedly last year in her sleep. I had another friend who had a life altering physical accident and now she's disabled. And so we don't know what tomorrow brings. And to wait for a future date is not helpful. Coming back to your question about the other pieces around the identity, I think that something else that happens in midlife for us is that relationship with achievement can shift. So instead of like, okay, I have these awards on my mantle, it seems empty, hollow. It doesn't have the shine that it once had. Those deeper relationships, a sense of impact, legacy, engaging in meaningful pursuits, and more of who I am instead of what I'm doing. Everybody comes to that kind of choice point in the road. But for those that do and want to go deeper, I think there's a lot of this driving these thoughts behind the scenes too.
Yeah. Arthur Brooks talks about this idea of the striver's curse. And I'm curious if you've noticed that with the folks that you've worked with, and also if you can expand a little bit more about what does that mean to strive and how that's shifted?
As I understand the striver's curse, it's this idea that we're just wanting to achieve things, right? Or it's a sense of our identity is related to what we produce, what we achieve, what we accomplish. And so redefining our relationship with that is a big part of our second half of adult development too.
I just think Brooks really thinks about it in terms of it actually because you're so focused and you become myopic and that becomes what propels you forward is your success in your career at the expense of a lot of other things. He personally talks about how that happened in his own life. And and so I want to strive to be the best I can be in my career. It's driven by an ego. And it is about who I am in this world and what is my contribution. And it is about me in the moment at all costs. And so when you get so focused on who you are and fail to recognize that your career is a finite period of time, and what are you going to do to then build a life that has this abundance in multiple areas, in addition to your identity being tied to your career? So your health and fitness, your mindfulness practices, how am I giving back to the world? What are some of the social connections that I want to make sure that I keep in my life? What are those relationships that are most important or the areas where I'm not fulfilling right now? So you become myopic and you become really focused and driven by your ego and your contribution to your career, which is a little bit about how he describes that striver's curse.
I'm curious about the emotions. We've talked to so many people who have discussed their transition and experts who are working with different elements that reflect that transition. And I'm wondering what emotions you've noticed that the retirees have during this stage of these transitions that they're going through. And I have to say, I don't think the transition happens quickly. And I think that once you start a transition, you'll find there's more than one that has to happen. So, can you just give us some idea of what those emotions might be that you've experienced with your clients?
Yeah, I think there's a broad range, and people approach the transition with different emotions. Some are excited about it, right? There could be a number of reasons why they worked really hard for a long time, and now there's this freedom that comes with it. But the reality, as Kathleen, can sometimes be different than what you're envisioning going into it. So even for people that are excited, there can be a sense of like loss or grief leaving behind those relationships from work, or the sense of satisfaction they got out of maybe collaborating with coworkers. The things that they really enjoyed about their jobs that are no longer present in their lives unless they intentionally choose to make them. People are surprised, I think, by that sense of loss or grief going through those things. And then there's just a disorientation that happens where it's like they're not in their old world and yet they haven't fully formed their new normal. And Lori loves talking about the messy middle. And it's that, but I'm not here and I'm not there. So where am I? And so nothing feels right. And that can be hard to be in that space.
Do you think it's a sense of belonging, not knowing where you belong if you're straddling these two lives, I'm going to say? How would you explain that to someone who's planning to retire? How would you explain that to them?
I'll take that one, Kirsten. Thanks. We clearly recognize is that just by sheer association with an organization, with a team, with your community inside an organization, there is a sense of belonging. There's a sense of connectedness. And when you're in this transition, as Kirsten mentioned, this messy middle, so you have this ending of something where you have grief. It's a loss. The idea of grief and the emotional loss of something, that routine, that normalness. And I belonged. I had a sense of connection, and I'm sitting here in this liminal space of the messy middle, and I'm not quite sure. I have one foot out of career. I'm not sure where I'm going next. And so to be intentional to think about, this is where I ask people to think about their values. What is really important to you with regards to your personal values? You've been connected to an organization that has organizational values. Sometimes that's incongruent with your own personal values. So we actually have people think about, come up with your top 3 to 5 values that you want to build in, that you want to begin to really behave in such a way that your life is in alignment with those values. And that will help create this sense of belonging for what you want in your future life. So you can create that belonging when there is this alignment with your core values of who you are as an individual, and create and build in and architect activities, experiences. You've got this abundance of time now. How do you want to really live that in a way where there's this connection? Because belonging is about connection. So
Oh,
what does
true.
that look like for me going forward?
I think those are great tips and a good vision in which to use when you're looking at the horizon and wondering where you do belong. And I think that's something that an easy method for people who are listening to embrace and utilize, not just on the onset, but continually, because it does
Yeah.
change and it does morph. Yes, that's really a powerful comment.
Thank you.
As someone who's preparing for retirement, have you noticed any particular beliefs, limiting beliefs, myths, or others that they're coming into retirement with that may not be as helpful?
Some people feel like they need to have it all figured out
Uh,
as they move into this next chapter. And that can put too much pressure on them because they don't really know until they experience it. As Kathleen mentioned, we can tell people these things, but until you have firsthand experience, you don't really know what that's like. So I often think this was another realization I had as I began this work. I thought, okay, we have to plan out like 30 years. So 65 to 95 or whatever, this big chunk of time. But when I left the university, I didn't think about what I needed to do for the next 30 years of my life. I was like, I just got to get a job and just get an apartment and start living life. And so to not feel like it's this onerous, massive life plan but to just break it into smaller, manageable chunks. Maybe the next 5 years you align if you have a partner with like where you're going to live and your general, what your day to day life is going to look like. Somehow that is, I think, a really freeing to think you don't have to have all the answers too. And then the opposite of that, people having a plan for 30 years, people thinking they don't need to have any plan. It'll just happen because now I'm going to have all this freedom to do all those things that I wanted to do. And then they might find themselves waking up after the first couple of weeks of freedom going, I don't have to be anywhere at any time. I need to have some plan because this no plan is not working for me either. Right. So it's like the having some plan. That would be my suggestion.
Well, I think that I would certainly agree with that. Having no plan means no activity. And you have to be active in order to feel purposeful in life. And that activity can take on many different models. And giving yourself permission to embrace the changes as they come along and the opportunities as they present themselves, I think is something that retirees need to allow themselves to do. And many of them don't. They really pigeonhole themselves with beliefs and limiting beliefs that cause them to be blind to opportunities that may reflect those core values that you speak of, Lori. And it's important for people to have that understanding that if it doesn't work, pivot. If it's not what you thought it was going to be, pivot. And I love what you've said about that because that's going to be a steadfast reminder for people as they're moving forward through this period in their life.
Lori, did you have any thoughts on perceptions, beliefs, myths that people have about retirement?
Yeah, I think building off of Kirsten's thoughts about just time and having a plan, because you have what we now call this time abundance. People think it's going to be fun. In fact, we have a participant that's joining our upcoming cohort program who has been retired for a year. And she said the first 6 months was like, woo, this is great. I'm golfing, I'm traveling, I'm spending time with friends and family. And then 6 months, and she's like, now what am I doing? What do I want to be doing with this time? And so she's joined our upcoming program so that she can explore that a little bit more with others, that it begins to feel like it's a little bit more of a normalized beyond just the, whoa, it's great. It helps people realize it's normal to go through this ebb and flow. But one of the myths is around like it's all fun. It's all going to be fun, but you've got to be intentional about how you're going to maximize the utilization of your time. If you fail to do that, we know some of the downsides. So the research clearly shows that obesity increases, alcohol and other addictions increase because people get depressed. They had this fulfilled life and identity as a career person, and that's no longer there. So they do go through grief and they become sometimes a little more secluded, especially if you're an introvert. And you've got to really be thoughtful about what am I going to do to create social connection? And I'm not saying go to every party and invite that you're asked, but it's being thoughtful and not saying, oh, it's snowing out and I could just sit here by the fire and read this book for the next week. You've got to be like, okay, wait, I haven't left my house in a week. What am I going to do to continue to be connected with other people?
Kathleen, you said you tried the yes thing to everything for a while.
I did, again, moving into a new community. And I thought, all right, so I have to make my own future because no one's going to do it for you. If you don't take that first step, regardless of how difficult that step might be, it has to be made. And I decided that I would go to a luncheon that I didn't know a soul. So, okay, I went to this luncheon and then someone said, well, if you really want to know what your new community is all about, go and do this. And I said, okay, I'll go and do that. And then someone said, well, I think you need to do this. And I said, okay, I'll do this. I said to Yasmin, I decided that I would say yes to everything. And I did. And at one point, we even invited complete strangers into our home for a social event. That seems to be the norm down here when you're new. And it was a little nerve-wracking, quite frankly, because you didn't know who was coming. But I want to tell you, saying yes to everything certainly gave me a broad spectrum of what I really did not want to do. So I learned quite quickly I'm never going to do that. And no, thank you. Don't ask me again. But it was a backwards progress when you think about how I did that. But quite frankly, I think that allowing myself to say yes to everything and then allowing myself to say no and when to put up those stop. Because one of the things that happens, I believe, in retirement is when you start to say yes and open doors and have new opportunities, people have such high expectations of you. Oh, well, then you can do this. And oh, then we'll have you involved with that. And I have to say, within 3 months, we had so many fundraising opportunities that I thought, I'm going to go mad. This is ridiculous. So I believe you have to allow yourself and give yourself the permission to say, no, thank you. And that's a part of, I think, the evolution. But yes, saying yes is the only way to do it, taking that step.
I think you're pointing out something really important, Kathleen. And it sounds like you're maybe regretting the say yes to everything approach. But I think when you're in a learning mode, you're in a new community to be exposed to new people and opportunities. And I think that's really worthwhile, right? But then setting those boundaries is important. And as Lori mentioned, when we're clear on what our values are, then we can align our activities and who we spend time with based on our values. Right. So there's alignment because it's when it's misaligned, like maybe fundraising isn't like a super high priority for you, and that's cool. That's what causes the friction.
Well, I had completed a long stint of fundraising. And I just thought, I'm not going to go down that avenue again because I know how wide the breadth is when you're asked to do something. But yeah, I think you're right. Finding someone that you can share values with is probably, I think, the most important endeavor you can do when you retire. And it's irrelevant to whether you change cities the way I did, because culturally, if we change our careers, there is a void. And now we have to go and fill that void, whether it's through some of the different methods that you've just spoken of. Retirees need to have opportunities to feel good about themselves. And whether it's fundraising or whether it's giving back to the community or a number of other things, it's important for them to have that flexibility. And I think you really have to be careful on how you overschedule yourself. I don't want to sit at home, but I also don't want to feel like I'm on a 9 to 5. And that can happen easily if you aren't with people who are aligned with the same values.
We had one woman in our last cohort who she had left her 9 to 5 job to retire. She created a consulting company and she then was 60 hours a week. Super successful. She's like, I am back to where I started. What am I doing wrong? She had to really look at her relationship with work as a whole. And her examination of her values helped her to see what was working and not working in her life. And she's in the process of cutting back so that work is serving her and she's not serving the work.
Yasmin and I have had that conversation. And limits are good. I think when you self-imposed limits are even better. But I think you're right. You have to take stock. And the fact that you two are helping people in the transition, retirees in that transition stage is remarkable.
We talked about earlier this concept of thriving. I'm curious, what does thriving in retirement look like? And what are some things that tend to get in the way for people to thrive?
We use the positive psychology approach. There's an acronym called PERMA. And maybe you two have already discussed this in one of your previous podcasts, but is that a concept you all have explored before?
I've explored it when I was writing my book about joy and understanding all the different aspects of that, but we haven't explored that.
No, we haven't. Formally, no.
Okay. All right. Well, let's do it.
Let's dive.
So we use this acronym that actually psychologist Martin Seligman coined and came up with this whole concept. So we're borrowing it from him. We did not create this framework, but PERMA it's 5 letters, PERMA, and it stands for these 5 things that we as human beings need to really thrive and flourish. So one is that sense of like positive emotions. So as we go through our day, and especially in the workplace, what positive emotions arise for us? What like happiness or contentment, pleasure, things like that. It stands for engagement or that sense of flow. When time stands still, what kinds of activities are we engaged in? Are we just enjoying every moment? R stands for relationships or connections, we talked about a little bit earlier. M is for meaning or
Mhm.
purpose. So the work that we do and our lives that we lead are somehow related to the larger community and leaving an impact and a legacy, having, yeah, it's like a purpose that is much larger than ourselves as our individual human selves. And then A is for accomplishment or achievement. So that sense of we've accomplished something and we finished a project or we've done hit a fundraising goal with a group, things like that too. So what we ask folks to do in retirement transition coaching process is to identify how those needs are currently being met in their lives. What are you currently doing where you're getting these positive emotions and connecting with others, having meaning, purpose? But then how will you get those met in the next chapter of life? An example I like to think about is maybe a CEO type or a hard driven corporate type who they're closing deals and they're launching initiatives. And so they have maybe a high need for accomplishment and achievement, or they've defined it in a certain way. And so now in retirement, is watching a vegetable garden grow going to give them that same sense of achievement? Maybe not. Maybe it will. But if they know that's a big need for them and it needs to be met in a certain way, they need to be thoughtful about creating situations, experiences when they're going to get that need met. If not, they're going to be really unhappy.
And I couldn't concur more.
What was your experience with that, Kathleen?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I lived through that. And that's one of the reasons that I said retirement, the way other people assumed retirement should work or unfold, didn't resonate with me. I felt I wasn't accomplishing what I could. I wasn't giving the knowledge that I had acquired over the years to other people who really needed it, which is, I guess, my accomplishment. And I think that relationships are really incredibly important for me. And so I felt that the loss of those relationships were really hard to replace. So you couldn't replace them. You had to start new, and that's okay too. Yasmin and I know I have this kind of theory about relationships. I believe every relationship has a life expectancy, whether it's a friendship, and you can't hold on to them when that life expectancy is over. So, yeah, I went through the same thing. And I felt that the tools that I had that I now know would have helped me, I had to pull apart, search for them. And thankfully, Yasmin was there. And we together decided that this was probably my savior. I'm not a depressed person, but I did after 3 months. Someone asked me, are you ever depressed? And I thought, I don't know, maybe that's what it is. I never ever experienced that emotion, so it was difficult for me to, articulate.
You also brought up something there important about relationships having a season, finite period of time. And that is something we ask people to look at. We ask them to list their close friends, whether they're neighbors, coworkers, through activities or what have you, and then to rate the quality of that relationship from 1 to 5. And they don't share with us or anybody, but it's just like, okay, maybe that relationship has run its course. Maybe it's because of a values misalignment or you don't have things in common that you used to. There are a lot of reasons why that happens, but then we can spend our meaningful time with people that we really do value
Yeah,
and share common things with. And that also has a big impact on how we feel about our lives and our mental attitude
absolutely.
and emotional state, big time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Our relationships play such a big role in our well-being and our happiness, right? And as we talk about this life expectancy or expiration of our season of our relationships, what's interesting, it reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine who is a relationship coach, Stacy Martino. You know her, Kathleen.
Mhm.
And she shared this concept that was really quite a paradigm shift and helped me navigate the evolution of some relationships. One of the things that she shared was this idea that relationships are either in your right hand or your left hand. And think of your right hand as people that you may have known most of your life. It may be family, it may be friends, it may be work colleagues as well. And at some point in time, they might not be in alignment with us anymore in terms of maybe the things we believe, what we're passionate about, or maybe they're always negative or whatever it is, but they're still in our lives. They exist in our right hand so that we can love and share with them. However, there's another opportunity which is in our left hand. And these are the people that we grow with. These are the folks where they celebrate us, they pick us up, we support each other, and we have more common beliefs in certain things. And this is where we get that validation, that support, but we don't necessarily need to go to our right hand to do that, because sometimes when we reach out to those folks, we might not get what we need. And to understand the discernment between perhaps the role that they may play in our lives allows us to have the proper not only expectations, but also to know where we go to grow and where we go to love. And I just found that as a valuable tool to be able to navigate the evolution of our relationships, is to know which hand are you in. And sometimes someone might be going through something that is really challenging, and you shift them from your left hand into your right hand, and you just go to love them up, but you don't have an expectation that they're going to reciprocate or respond in a certain way, because you've got a full left hand of all these amazing folks that are there to grow with you.
I think we need to take that analogy going forward, Kirsten. I love that. The right hand and the left hand when it comes to relationships. It's really powerful.
I know Stacy, and they're such a great couple. And they have been working so hard on relationships that their career is brilliant. And I've always thought of it as your family, and that I guess would be your right hand, and the left hand is the family you make. So we're talking the same language, but we're just using different terms. And there are strong relationships that you make. And as I said, those are the family you choose. So I can attest that is an absolute truthful method of what you should expect and how you should relate to these people. Is sometimes if you expect from your family what your found family will give you, the dynamic is shifting. And sometimes it's not in a positive way. And so those things that we expect from people have to be directed to the people who are prepared to give them.
Really nice.
You and Kirsten have talked about this cohort. Can you share with us how you support those on this journey?
Yeah, thank you. So we both do one-on-one coaching. So for anybody who is at this crossroads of their life, leaving a significant career or contemplating leaving it and trying to define what's next for them, we do one-on-one coaching. We follow a similar process and approach in one-on-one coaching as we do in this cohort. The beauty of the cohort is that we bring together a small group of up to 10 humans to really explore together some critical components. We've talked about several of them. Your values, what is your purpose? You'll walk away with a blueprint, which is really about a commitment to yourself to take some action to really move forward with designing this experience of this life where I'm going to flourish, where it's going to be vital, where I can have these relationships that support me where I am today and in the future. Our cohort is 5 labs is what we call them. It's a small group, and we meet 5 times collectively as a group. And then we have 4 one-on-one coaching sessions between. And then at the very end, you walk away with having done some reflection, having done your own PERMA exercise, having done a values exercise. There's some other exercises we have them do, and then one-on-one coaching so that you end up with, where am I headed? Where am I going? If I am going to be retiring a year from now, how am I going to be practicing retirement between now and a year from now? What are the things I want to build in? Kirsten mentioned this. How can I build in some of those things that I think I want to be doing post my significant career? But I'm going to practice building some of those in now. I'm going to explore them. Kathleen talked about saying yes. So what are those things I want to say yes to? Maybe it's a year of yes. I'm going to have this year of yes and have that as information and data to then inform how I'm going to create this thriving, flourishing post-career experience. So people will walk away with a designed kind of blueprint of a roadmap for themselves for the next 6 months. Maybe it's the next 12 months, depending upon where they're at in their life transition right now.
And I'd like to add a little bit
Yeah.
onto what Lori, great overview of the program. And I think what's cool about the small group cohort that you and I both seen individually that is this incredible value add outside of the one-on-one coaching is people in a small group normalize this transition, normalize the feelings that you share, thing that you've gone through, to just hear other people struggling with the same issues or asking themselves these questions is huge. The other part is people can share resources. So they hear a story that someone else is sharing in the group and they're like, oh my gosh, they figured it out this way, or they thought about it this way, or they did this thing. And so there's just a support sharing of resources and acknowledging that I think you're not alone in this. Even if everyone's journey is different, there's something about feeling like you're not in it alone that is even more valuable than working one on one with a coach.
I couldn't agree more. It is that commonality and it's touchstone with people who've walked it before you and knowing that you're not alone, you've got resource, human resource that's available and relationships are built because of that. And I'm sure that people in your cohort are going to continue on with that relationship.
What a powerful way to bring people together. I think there's this element of learning about what's ahead, and there's also this other element of belonging
Mhm.
that I think that people are definitely thinking and feeling in that container. I would imagine it gives people permission to not only talk about, but share, but relate with others as to maybe some of the fears, maybe some of the things that they're going through. And so, what a really powerful way to be able to learn and grow together and perhaps invite some people into the left hand as well.
Oh, that's nice.
Really nice.
How does someone go about learning more about both your coaching as well as this cohort that you are bringing together?
Well, I think they can reach out to either of us individually. If you share the email, the contact information as part of the podcast, they can talk to either of us. And then we book a discovery call to make sure that what they're looking for, we can provide, that this is a good fit for their needs. And because we want to bring a group together that is generally in the same space, that's important. People that are,
Is this online or in person physically?
it's all virtual. So people can be anywhere, North America or any time zone, they can.
Now they can stay up for.
Exactly.
It really builds a beautiful community. Our group that we just wrapped up recently, a group of amazing, kind of nurturing, a little bit of nurturing that happens there, but also just creating the space for people to share and be vulnerable and to talk about like, this is a significant life transition. And
Mhm.
let's hook arms and hold each other up as we go through this together.
I love that you said vulnerable time because I think that if you share those vulnerabilities, that's what allows you to release yourself from those beliefs, those unnatural, humiliating beliefs that you figure you can't do something. And it was interesting, Lori, when you mentioned as a child, I took tap dancing and I can't swim. So all of a sudden immediately, I thought, wow, we are really aligned in life. And it was something simple like that. So you can only imagine when you go into something much deeper, how those alignments, how strong those are. So it's wonderful way to do it.
As you've wrapped up this past cohort, I'm curious, what were some of the ahas, insights, or even transformations that you've noticed with the participants?
I think what's surprising is how I think about it as like an operating system. So it's even different than like a limiting belief, but we all go through life from a certain point of view, right? And we think our role in it is X. We're the helper, we're the teacher, we're the servant to others, we're the whatever, we're the rebel. And so what we saw is each person really looked at the way that they operate in the world and made some different choices around that. So it does have to do with values, it does have to do with identity, but just like one person just always caring for others' needs and then recognizing, "Oh, I can put myself first finally." What could that look like? So it's related to the concepts we talked about today, but then it's somehow bigger than all of that. What do you think, Lori?
Well, I think each person has a discovery a very personal discovery through the process. And they take time to be intentional and reflective. Everybody in our most recent cohort said this was beyond what I thought I was going to get out of this experience on multiple levels, from creating community and connection to really realizing, you know what, I'm a professor and I want to continue. Like, knowledge is really important to me. I thought maybe I'd stop in that teaching space, but guess what? I want to continue that. So I know that's one of my core values. How will I share my knowledge with others? And so through that process was able to actually discern it and figure out a creative way to be able to still do that. Some people want to have adventure in their life. What does that look like? What does it mean to have adventure? Can your financial means support that sort of an adventurous life that you want? And so you have to look at that. And if adventure is a core value, what does that mean to you? Does it mean, hey, we're going to go camping and we're going to go hiking down in Utah and go through the national parks? Or does adventure mean I'm going to go travel internationally 3 times a year because I've also got the financial means to do? So it gets linked back to core values.
As we wrap up, based on our conversation today, what's something that is important for someone to take away as they listen to our conversation?
I would say create a plan and be intentional about this transition for yourself, but don't be so locked in that you can't be open to new opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think being fluid, having the mindset that it's an organic process and you've got to allow yourself some fluidity through it. Also having some guardrails. So what is it, if you could define and describe your first week of retirement, your first 3 months of retirement, your first 6 weeks, or even the word retirement, what does that really mean to you? Let's talk about that. And then let's think about how you craft that and design that and test it out for a year. If it's not working 6 months in, then you say, okay, or in Kathleen's case, 3 months in, this isn't it. Let's continue to allow myself the grace to learn from it and experience it and shift it and pivot.
Thank you.
Thank
Wow.
you. Wow. Good conversation. This could go on for a very long time. It's an abundance of concepts, ideas, introspective tools. And thank you so much for bringing all this to us. And obviously to many of the people that you deal with and work with on a daily basis. So what a joy it is. This is another part of having joy in your life.
Thank you.
It's certainly a gift to have you here and to not only share your wisdom, but also to acknowledge the work that you are doing out there that are helping so many people through this amazing chapter of their lives that they can be thriving. And so thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
The pleasure was ours.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it valuable, please subscribe, follow, and leave a comment or review on your favorite platform. If you have friends, clients, or loved ones who are retired or thinking about retirement, we invite you to share this show with them. Check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned in this episode at realretirementshow.com. Remember, retirement is a joyful journey we get to experience together. Join us next week for another Real Retirement Conversation.